Event is starting. We're 1 second in. Okay, I'm gonna ramble a little bit just until I make sure you can hear me. So if you're listening and seeing my face both at the same time, let me know in the comments. We have a chat bar to the right of the YouTube screen. Usually it's on the right. It depends on your device. If you can't see it, look for an arrow drop down or something that says more, and you should be able to track it down. In the chat is where you can ask questions during this live watercolor lesson. And I have my friend Nina here. Say hi, Nina. She's in Croatia and she's here via the magic of the internet. We're here from all over the world, which is just awesome. And she's going to take your questions. She's going to throw them in a document. And at the end of the lesson, I look at those and I answer as many as I can. So that's where you get to ask your questions. That way you don't have to save them up for the end. You can ask them anytime. Good, you can see, you can hear me, we can start. Again, my name is Angela Fair. I am a watercolor addict. I love watercolor. I would do it even if I could never put it on the internet and nobody was paying me money. And I did that for many years. And I do it because I love the medium. It makes my heart happy. It's helped me see the world in new ways. I think I experience my life more richly because I am a painter. And if you've experienced that as you've pursued your own creativity, why don't you say so in the comments? Let me know how you see art as enriching your life. When we focus on the ways creativity, what it contributes to our quality of life, I think that's one of the number one things that we can do to stay encouraged in our creative journey as we work to build skill. So I really do try to think about my mental health and my making that time and space for creativity in my life. That's actually gotten harder as I've been a watercolor instructor because I have watercolor I do for work, but I also need to do watercolor for me. And actually, I'm going to switch the camera over right now so I can show you what I did in between this morning's broadcast and this afternoon's. And unfortunately, the lighting is really, really blue on my screen. This is actually... I'll get in a little closer, see if that helps. Yeah, it's not really. This is actually more of like an orange and like a reddish violet painting. And I had a first layer that I'd made previously. And after I got off with you guys, with my morning crew, doing our early morning video, and I know some of you are here for the second go around. I pulled out this piece of paper. It had some paint on it already, and I just did more of what was already on there. I threw in a bunch of Fearless Dark Violet and had really, really good time. I don't know what it is, and I don't know if it's finished, but it made my heart happy. And so that was a really good way to just connect back to my love of watercolor so I can come back and teach you all just a little more passionately, because I need more passion in my life. Great comments popping up about how art has blessed you and it contributed to your mental health. I think that's really wonderful. I get emails about this literally every day, and I just keep coming back to that. This love for what we do, which needs to drive our learning and help us to again stay encouraged. So yesterday we looked at some very basic watercolor techniques, and I believe that watercolor really isn't complicated when it comes to technique. We have a handful of techniques, and in learning how to wield them confidently, we get to be creative with them. So the professional artists that you meet and that you see their work on the internet, they are using the same techniques as you. They're just doing it better. They've just had more years to master those techniques and to create strategies for making them their own. And a lot of that is problem solving. And we're going to talk about that. Yesterday, if you missed yesterday's video, do go and take a look. We did a first layer wash where we created the background for what we're going to paint today. And we took a look at supplies. I do have a link to kind of a printable that you can download and print and read up on my opinion when it comes to watercolor supplies and my recommended supplies. That's all there for you in the description below the video. I have a couple more things in the description, a couple more links that I'd love for you to take advantage of, and I'll tell you about those in a minute. Just quickly going through my list here of things to share with you. We're going to do a little bit of talking about mistakes and problem solving in watercolor. This is really important to me because what I've seen in the students I have taught is we have students who start painting and keep painting and love it. And we have students who start painting, love it, but somewhere along the way, they lose heart and they quit. Or they walk away for years before they come back to it again. And I don't want you to be one of those people. I want you to stay encouraged and stay focused on why you love watercolor and on keeping that connection to your heart so that you can build skill and paint with skill and confidence. So it's really important to talk about mindset. So if we'd spend a little less time painting early on in the lesson here, it's for a good reason. And if you're watching the recording, don't skip ahead. Hang around. This is important stuff, because if you are discouraged, if you feel like a failure, you will not feel motivated to keep painting. And you'll have a really hard time feeling creative in what you're doing. So it's important, really important, to have the right mindset. When we're talking about creative discipline, mindset is a very, very big part of that. For myself as a self-taught artist, I started with those few classes like I talked about yesterday. And then from there, building skill by learning trial and error. Doing things wrong so I could learn how to do them right was a very big part of my learning process. And I don't feel, actually, I hate the term self-taught artist. It seems like so often when artists write a biography, they have to debate, do I include self-taught artist? I think as opposed to maybe university or college educated artist, but whoever your teacher is, you still need to do the work to build the skill. And so all of us are self-taught artists, no matter what level of education in the medium we've had. At some point, you still need to pick up the brush and build the skills. My daughter takes piano. She is not a piano player if she only goes to lessons and never practices. She does not learn piano without actually doing the practice, putting in those hours. And I'm so proud of the discipline that she's shown. And very much of that is to her credit. She has a great teacher. We love her teacher. She loves her teacher. But, it's to her credit that she does the work. And she's invested that time. And when she pursues music, if she does after high school, which she would like to do, at some point people are going to stop asking who your teacher was, and they were just going to admire her skill. It's not about the teacher. It's about recognizing the investment that person has made in their art, in their discipline. And unfortunately, we tend to minimize that when it comes to visual arts, when it comes to painting. And photography. We ask stupid questions like, what brush are you using? As if the brush is the one doing the work, making the decisions. We ask a photographer, what camera that is, instead of recognizing the power of their eye to frame the picture and figure out the lighting and all of that stuff. So it's this, you need skill, and we need to give ourselves time to develop that skill. I was also very ambitious when I was learning to paint. There's a part of me, I think it's competitiveness. I always want to be the best. And so I would look at the artists around me who were mostly hobbyists. And then I would look at my watercolor magazines who were the world-class artists in those magazines and want to be them. I wanted to be at that level. And there was a time in my artistic journey, a couple years in, where I started to recognize that maybe that wasn't going to be me. Maybe the cards were stacked against me. Maybe I didn't have that innate skill that they seemed to have. And I had to decide at that point. And I've actually done way better than I ever thought I could do in pursuing watercolor, in growing my skill. So I blew my own mind there. But back then, at that point of saying, maybe I don't have, world-class skill. And I still don't think I have world-class skill. And that's in a whole nother story. We don't talking about who judges who and decides who's the best. But at that time, I had to say, if I'm not going to reach that peak of the things I'd like to achieve in watercolor, then why am I doing it? Should I continue? And my answer to that was yes. I love watercolor enough to keep doing it, even if nobody ever thinks my paintings are any good. And that was very, very freeing, because then I got to think about, what do I really want my paintings to be about? How do I become most satisfied in this for me? If I can't please other people with my art, then I need to focus on pleasing myself. And I became freed to explore and really express my personal style. And I went from being a realistic painter with a lot of control to chasing those watermarks that I loved and fluid color and lots of color. And it was so much fun and so freeing. And if you've ever had that moment in your painting experience where time drops away and you feel at one with the paper and the paint, you know what I'm talking about. It's addictive and you want to chase it and pursue it. And so we look to make conditions for that to continue to happen and happen more frequently. It still doesn't happen every time I paint. We're going to talk about that. But at this point, we're just here because we love it and we want to do more of it. We want to be authentic and honest in our paintings because watercolor shows how we feel. So when we're painting for a love of it, it comes out on our paper and people connect to that. When my art changed from that realistic technical skill to, with a lot of control to that heart-led authenticity, my paintings became a lot messier and a lot less about, good-looking stuff. And yet people connected with my art so much more. Other people were falling in love with my paintings and they were more of a reflection of my heart. So that was a really high honor and amazing when you trust yourself enough to let that inner you out. And the people that connect with it, they're your people. And I'm so thankful for those of you who are here who love my work. You're my people. And we're together. We're here because we love watercolor. We're each other's people. So watercolor is both a journey of control and collaboration. And I'm just going to switch the screen here to this gratuitous picture of my dog. I passed her as I was coming to the studio this morning and she has the most beautiful eyes and I just wanted to show you. So there she is. Her name is Ari and she's very special. She's part German Shepherd and also part Corgi. So she's just a short little good-natured thing. Okay, so we talk about controlling watercolor. Watercolor is a journey where we both work to control the medium and we desire to collaborate with what's happening on the paper. And when we allow watercolor to move and flow, we become more. When we allow watercolor to move and flow, I'm trying to rephrase this sentence that I wrote, and I should just read it. We become more free to allow watercolor to move and flow when we've learned techniques and feel comfortable using them. So building skill by logging brush miles, as I mentioned yesterday, is the first step. And we talked about teaching your toddler how to write their name and how we have full confidence they can do it. They need the skills and they have to practice. And we do the same thing with watercolor. I've learned that to a certain extent, watercolor can be controlled. But to another extent, it has a mind of its own. And some of the most beautiful things happen when I stay open to allow watercolor to do its thing and then respond to that thing as it happens. And I did that with that painting I showed you earlier. Now we have some trouble areas. We have some things that happen that make it really hard to work in watercolor. And these are the things we're going to talk about today. Problem solving. First of all, we have a piece of white paper, terrifyingly white paper. And the first thing we think when we see it is, how am I going to mess this up? What mistake am I going to make to ruin this piece of paper? And we're scared of that white piece of paper because we want it to match the picture we have in our brain. So, that fear of the blank page can sometimes stop us from even starting. And say yes in the chat if you've actually had that experience where you know you have time to paint, you'd planned to paint, and yet you just didn't get off the couch to go and paint. There was something in you that was just scared of failure, and you wasted that time that you really wanted to spend painting. I know I'm putting my hand up. That was me. I still do that. That happened to me actually today in between our sessions. I was really tempted to just spend the time in between our two sessions here checking my email and, checking up on Facebook. I have a lot of happy birthday greetings to catch up on. And so there's that fear that masks itself often as procrastination. So that's one issue that we have. We have the oh no, I made a mistake issue. And we're going to talk about some ways to solve mistakes. My least favorite way of solving mistakes and my favorite way of dealing with mistakes in watercolor. And then we're going to look at the fact, actually, we're just going to talk about it right now. Every painting is brand new territory. What you are painting has never, ever in the history of the world been painted before. You are the first person to take what's in your head and want to get it out on paper. And so it's new territory. And that means that It's uncharted territory. You might lose the way as you're trying to get your message out onto your paper. Might take you having to paint it more than once. And it also means that nobody can tell you that what you did is wrong, because it's a unique, one-of-a-kind piece of art. Nobody's ever done it before. It's yours. And then finally, we have the problem of me, my intention, me versus the reference photo. Who is in charge? Who decides what your painting's going to look like? Are you copying your reference photo? Where do you put your own spin on it and edit it to suit you? And then in addition to that, you're also fighting with your own expectations, because we have an idea of how the painting's going to go. And as we make mistakes or things change, we have to then adjust what we expected we would get from that painting. So these are all things that we battle with in our process of problem solving. And we're going to talk about these more in the demonstration today. We're going to cover some techniques today. We're going to look at negative painting. We're going to work with edges and softening out. We did that a little bit yesterday. We're doing more today. We're going to paint some small scale wet and wet. Again, stuff we did yesterday. But again, doing more of it. We have just a few techniques in watercolor, and we learn how to use them in multiple ways. And then we are going to take a little review of wet on dry, some wet on dry techniques. And we're going to talk just a bit about layering. It's a lot of content. And so it's going to be very brief on each one. We're going to do the best we can to give you a good look at each of those. Again, ask your questions in the chat. Nina is keeping an eye on them. I will answer as many as I can as they are relevant at the end, and as long as my voice lasts. Okay, one thing that's important to me and I really don't want you to miss out on is the content in the description below the video. Look for the arrow and click on the arrow, or go to angelafair.com and you can contact me with any info you're looking for, or links to the content listed below. Number one there is my Fearless Artist email series. If you struggle with feeling like a failure, with facing your feelings and dealing with having keep staying positive while you're painting, I want you to be empowered and have that growth mindset. And I've created a series of emails designed to do just that. My Fearless Artist email series is encouraging. And I've had so many people email me and say, Angela, it's like you climbed in my head and took all my defeating thoughts. And, you know, you've been there. You know what it's like. And I do. I preach to myself all the time so I can stay encouraged and not give up. And by preaching to you on the same topic, it's another really good way of helping me stay focused on painting for the love of it and being my own favorite artist. Oh, and I want to talk about that too. Additionally, we have Watercolor Mastery info sessions coming up March 5th. Actually, the first live video session will be March 6th. And through that week, I will be sending out emails to help you know whether or not Watercolor Mastery is the right course for you. There is very little out there for artists who are trying to take the leap from following step-by-step tutorials and learning watercolor skills to becoming a confident and independent artist. When I was trying to learn, develop my personal style and really know who I was as an artist, it felt a lot like muddling around in the dark. I really struggled to really see, to know if what I was doing was actually working. And there we go. It was really hard to know if the painting I was doing was actually contributing to making me a stronger artist, or if I was just kind of spinning my wheels in trying to develop my personal style. So when I developed Watercolor Mastery, I really dug deep. I thought, what did I do that helped me to get to where I am, where I love my work, where I can be my own favorite artist? This sounds like the most arrogant thing to say, but when I talk about being your own favorite artist, what it is when you're painting authentically and transparently from your heart, you're doing the fullest expression of you. And I'm not very articulate about it. I'd rather paint it to show you. But I found that there were artists who would create artwork that really connects deeply with me. And some of my favorite artists make beautiful paintings. And every now and then one will come along that I just adore. And often I'll ask, what the price is, so I really want to own it. And yet, not all of their paintings arouse a response in me, and that's as it should be. They're not. I don't we're, we're all unique individuals. But when I'm painting to satisfy my own heartfelt desires, what should be coming off my brush should be deeply fulfilling and deeply connected to who I am. I should love it more than anybody else. And when that happens, it's just so exciting. I don't think it's an arrogant thing to say you're your own favorite artist. It's something we should all be striving for because it reveals a level of authenticity and truth. It means that you get to love your personal style, whether you're a realist painter or a loose painter, or if you like abstracts or portraits or whatever. When you are painting to satisfy that deep inner craving to express yourself, you're going to love who you are and what you do. And that's just the most exciting thing to teach and to share with you. So that's why I'm so passionate about watercolor mastery. If you are ready for that course, I want you to be there. And I don't want you there if you're not ready, because then you'll be overwhelmed and you'll just feel like giving up, because it does include some, upper level techniques and principles that you really have to make your own. And when your brain is occupied with building skill, that's the thing you want to focus on until you're ready to start thinking about expressing your style. If you're in that place, sign up for the information sessions, get a feel for whether or not watercolor mastery is right for you. Finally, I think there was one more thing. Oh yes, and there's a link to the supplies that I've talked about yesterday and that I'm recommending or showing today. So you can download that in the description below the video. All the links are there. We are going to switch the camera over right about now and start talking about mistakes, fixing mistakes, and then developing a painting beyond that first layer. So here we go over to the work surface, moving the mic so I'm a little closer to everything. And I want to start by showing you a stack of paintings. Let's see here. This is my work from perhaps the last 6 months. And I wanted to show it to you right now. Trying to make room. Because it's work that I really love and I'm proud of. But there's more to it than that. And I really try to evaluate my paintings based on how they make me feel. When I'm happy when I see a painting, it's a successful painting. End of story. That's my criteria. The happier I am, the more likely I am to frame that piece. This one is my happiest painting right now. I think I called it Plenty and then a bit more because it really has a ton of color. And then I threw a bit more at it as well. And this actually turned out, this painting was a mistake to begin with. There was a whole bunch of brown and green in here. And I just started throwing paint at it to kind of cover it up and to see how far I could push it to change it up. And as you can see, you don't see any of that original color there. So mistakes, in this case, my mistake of painting a color I didn't love was my opportunity to push the envelope to go darker and richer with color than I ordinarily would and create something that really inspired me. This is just something that was a warm-up exercise. We're going to talk about warm-ups tomorrow, playing with 2 colors and seeing some wonderful bloomy magic result. This one makes me happy because it came so easily. And I got lucky that time. And then I just have a whole stack of other little things, lots of trees. This is two versions of a little landscape. I did a really big version. Of course, you always end up loving the smaller one more. It's just the way it is. This one, I'm kind of ambivalent about. I love it, I don't love it, I can't decide. Waiting till I know how I feel about it. I've been doing a little bit of work with watercolor graphite. Really fun to do value studies in that single color and really play with mark making. So that's what I've been doing there. But all of these paintings from the last 6 months, and there's about 30 paintings here, and I paint quite a lot. So 30 is a nice number. I probably can't afford to frame them all right away. But those 30 paintings did not emerge. They weren't the only things I did in the last 6 months. And I'm going to show you the rest of my work from the last 6 months. It's heavy. So this is my work from about the last 6 months or so. And as you can see, there are a lot of paintings here. These are paintings that I did, that I started. Some of them are finished, some of them aren't finished. Some are things that, are kind of okay. but I'm pretty sure that nothing in this pile will be framed. It's just not quite to that standard. I don't have that heart connection that I'm looking for. And I would say in this pile, I have at least 5 times as many paintings in this pile of rejects as I do in my pile of things I want to frame. So I want you to think about that for a minute. And decide whether or not you want to take lessons from somebody who's failed that many times. Because what has happened as I've painted those many, many paintings is without those many paintings, I don't get to have that stack of 30 good paintings. I know and I've learned that I learn best by working out my paintings multiple times. I learn by experimenting and trying new things, and I need to give myself room to do that. Expecting to paint something perfectly every time is like expecting my piano player daughter to play every song without missing a note. It does not happen. It's like expecting her to write a song by playing all the notes to that song without ever having to seek out a different chord or whatever. We don't expect a musician to just sit down and play a brand new song flawlessly the first time. They work it out. And we have to give ourselves room to do the same thing. And if that makes sense to you, say so in the chat. Unfortunately, we often frame our learning as a desire to never fail. And then we also don't articulate our feelings about watercolor and recognize that we all start a painting thinking, I have no idea how to do this. And I realized just a few months ago that when I start a new painting, a blank piece of paper, reference photo, and I come to that piece of paper, my very first thought is, I don't know what I'm doing. And it's been that way for 20 plus years. So that's not going to go away. And if you're expecting that to go away 20 years in, you're going to be sadly disappointed. What we do is we become better with the coping mechanisms we need, the positive mindset, and we recognize that just because we failed a painting, it doesn't judge us. It doesn't say, oh, you're really not an artist and you need to give up today. So we get to have freedom to continue. I don't destroy my failures, and I think one reason that I don't is because those pieces of paper in that giant pile, some of them I'm going to flip through that pile in a few months, and there will be a few paintings there that I'm like, you know what, this is actually really good. But I couldn't see it at the time because I was so obsessed with what I thought was a mistake. And so my feelings about the painting were negative. And there's going to be other paintings where I'm like, you know what, if I just added a little bit more color to this area and a little bit more over here, that could actually work. And my skills will have grown to the point where I have a better idea of how to problem solve an issue in that painting. So I don't get rid of stuff. Plus, often those paintings serve as really good teaching tools. And I have a whole stack of paintings that are put away that I pull out to show students as teaching tools. So, okay, we're going to start painting. And I'm going to start with a little bit of negative painting, but before I start, I want to show you what I'm thinking. And I have a little tool to help me do that. So here we have our wet and wet background. It doesn't have any form, really. It's very soft. I don't think it feels complete. I don't think you think it feels complete. So we're going to start building up some layers. And I have this clear piece it's called Duralar. It's a it's a transparent sheet, but it allows you to paint on it. And I bought it, and then I'm like, what am I going to do with this stuff? And then I realized it would make a really good teaching tool. So here I can show you what's in my mind. I have this big pink shape, and we were going to paint tulips, but we could do all kinds of things. We could do maybe a lily, something that's a little bit cone-shaped. We could flip it over and do like a hanging vine kind of trumpet-shaped flower, which I really like the idea of, but I think that takes a little more complexity than I want to do today. But because we started out thinking tulips, I think I'm just going to stick with that. So we're going to pull out a shape here to be our tulip. And there's probably going to be a little bit of petals there. We're going to have a stem. We're going to have a leaf here. And we're going to have another leaf over here. And then we're going to look at these shapes as being some soft background tulips, and we'll develop those. When I'm painting over a background layer, I want to mostly work with what's happening there, which is one reason why it's a good idea to keep your first background pretty pale and fairly soft in shape. I have a big and large. It's both big and large pink shape here. And that could be one flower or it could be a whole bunch. And by showing you what's in my mind, you can kind of see the direction I'm going to go with it. This pink area here, I'm just ignoring right now. I can choose to minimize it so it's not an important part of the painting. Or I could choose to make that up my complexity of my painting and make that into further additional flowers. So that gives you an idea. I'll just give you a quick look at that product. It's called Dura Lar. There's an R in the end. And it says it's treated on both sides to accept water-based mediums. I really like it for being able to show you what I'm going to do. Plus, I think if you were working, where this might help you is if you had a painting you really liked. I'll show you our morning's painting. And you were thinking about adding something really powerful to it. You could test it out by putting that layer of acetate over it and then trying out that color just to see how it would work. So it's like a risk-free, way to test out something, test out an effect. I'm not sure I like that idea. You got to make mistakes like the rest of us. Come on. Okay, so we're going to mix up some pinks. And actually, we're going to not mix up some pinks. We're going to go back to the greens for a minute. I want to show you negative painting in the very simplest sense. And we're going to use the same colors we used yesterday. I don't like to change my colors in a second layer. I lose my consistency and my unity. And I want my painting to feel light and full of light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this green that I've mixed with my Hansa yellow and my phthalo turquoise, and I'm going to show you how I might negative paint to make my flower pop forward. And I'm starting with this. In the morning I started with the positive painting where you're actually painting the thing. But when you're negative painting, you're painting the thing around the thing. I think what I'm going to do is paint around my leaf on this side. We'll do it that way. So if I have a leaf on this side, I also have a background behind the leaf, and so that's what I would start out by painting. And I'm just using the green, although I could choose, actually I'm going to add a little bit of magenta to it. Yeah, magenta is the way to go. Look at how that addition of magenta tones my green down so it's a lot duller. And that's going to give me like a shadow look. And I could choose, if I wanted, to add, well, I don't know, I could add more magenta and get it really dark, but we're going to just keep it a little bit dull there. And then on this side, we're going to paint the other side around the leaf. And this isn't going to be a great painting by any stretch of the imagination. I'm going to be showing you how to fix mistakes on it, which mean I have to make mistakes on it to start with. But right away, I have the contours of this leaf appearing. And on this side, I'm going to just use a clean damp brush and soften so that I don't have a crisp line on that side. Notice how as soon as I've added a crisp line into my painting, it is the first thing your eye sees. And you can test this out. You can look away or close your eyes and then look back at the painting really quickly. See what your eye is drawn to first. It's going to be that crisp edge. So often when I'm doing negative painting, I don't want everything to look cut and pasted. So I'm going to use a variety of edges. I'm going to soften maybe a little bit over here, maybe a little bit over here, blur things together. And we call that a hide and seek edge or a lost and found edge. And that just gives me a little bit of a softer effect. It doesn't feel quite so clunky and awkward. We want to have this smooth, graceful flow and transitions. Watercolor is a graceful medium. So we want to think about that as we move our brush, we move in graceful strokes. And now I'm painting inside the leaf, creating some contours there. Softening with my brush. And now there's a line there that's really interesting. I could take straight up phthalo turquoise and add some strong, rich color there as well. And I'm just working in the corner. We're going to start working on the flower in just a second, but I wanted to demonstrate negative painting is not as intimidating as we often make it. It just means you're not painting the thing, you're painting the thing around the thing. You're darkening the other areas so that the focal point area, or the one you're painting around, stays lighter in value. And if you want to keep your values light on your focal point, you have to use negative painting. You just can't get around it. Okay, so we're going to use some positive painting to try to see that tulip. We're going to start up here and just create that contour. I'm ignoring this pink area down here, and I'm just going to paint one petal. Wet on dry. I have more control that way. And then I'm going to moisten that edge, the juicy brush, to give me a smooth gradation. It gives me a little bit of a nice contour. On this side, I'm actually going to paint this one in flat magenta as a flat wash, I guess we could say. And these aren't going to be the prettiest tulip petals because I'm not trying very hard. We'll talk about, we have other things to focus on today. And so I have here where it's a little bit flatter. You can still see the original colors of the background shining through. So we do try to cooperate with the colors that are there. I can darken values while it's wet here. I can put in a stronger wash of magenta with a little opera pink. And you can see it kind of creep across the painting. And that's painting wet in wet. I went straight from wet on dry to wet in wet. And so wet on wet techniques aren't just for backgrounds, they're for small scale objects as well. And I'm going to try to soften an edge here, knowing that this edge is already settled in a bit. So any softening I do is going to not have the same effect as if I'd done it right away. And we should talk about that because that's often one of the mistakes that we struggle with is those hard edges that then we see it and we're like, oh no, that edge is so hard and it started to dry and now I have to panic and try to scrub it off and soften it. And it can be really hard to back up and reverse in watercolor when you start to see a mistake. Let's try it over here. So I want to soften this edge. And as you can see, my quinacridone magenta is a bit of a staining color. It doesn't want to move. And I can rub along that edge with my brush. And it gets a little lighter. But then I start to have another issue. That extra water that I used as I was trying to soften is actually creating a bloom. You can see there's a bloom happening right in here and a bloom happening on this side because my water's not balanced, like we talked about. So as soon as I start fixing mistakes, I often start to create, or I should say, as soon as I start erasing mistakes, I often start to create new mistakes. It's not a fun thing. It's a kind of a lose-lose situation. I find, and my piano playing daughter is also learning to drive. And often when you make a mistake when you're driving somewhere, take a wrong turn, better than backtracking and losing time is correcting, compensating for that mistake. Maybe that means you have to drive a little further to the next turn. Maybe that means, I don't even know. But you can't always undo things that happen. We have to then compensate. And in watercolor, it's the same way. Often compensating gives us a better result than trying to undo. Erasing mistakes just gives us new mistakes to contend with. And it's a real struggle when you try to make watercolor do something it doesn't want to do. So say I have this petal here and I'm not loving the edge of it, and I have, it's not moving where I had that dark edge. So maybe instead of trying to erase it, I have to learn how to make it look pretty in its new kind of iteration. So I just touched in a little bit of violet, and look at how the violet spread out. That hid that edge actually really well. I can also take some of my background green at this point and spread that out a little bit. It's wanting to creep into my tulip, but I'm not done yet. This is really kind of an ugly tulip. We're going to add some more paint. And so I'm exploring ways of problem solving. I'm trying to do actually a little bit, I'm trying to camouflage right now. That's my technique. And so I have this soft edge happening on this side. It's hiding the soft edge on the other side. I had to make my flower darker than I'd intended because of it, but it's a good way to deal with it. Starting to hide it. The other thing you can do is, let's say I don't love, let me think here. So I don't love the contours of this petal, but I don't want to make it darker for whatever reason. I don't know why, but that's where we're going with this. I might decide I want to use negative painting to fix those contours. So rather than trying to make the petal darker and change the shape, I'm changing the shape around the shape. And we're doing it really badly today, but because I want to show you how I might adjust that shape by changing my background. So rather than changing the shape itself, I'm changing everything that's nearby and letting it do its thing. And that's giving me some changes. I also have some turquoise creeping into my flower. And that's the final way we're going to talk about fixing mistakes, is sometimes you have an accident, you know, maybe that dark phthalo turquoise creeping into my flower shape there. And I know phthalo turquoise is a staining color. So suddenly that's the darkest thing in the painting. Throwing more phthalo turquoise super darks, maybe over here, maybe in this area. Suddenly it starts to look like what happened was just completely intentional. But I have rich hues of phthalo turquoise all over my painting. So clearly Angela just always knows what she's doing. And maybe I like having some super darks in my flower. And we'll throw a stem in there, why not? And so suddenly what looked like an accident when it was all by itself creeping into the flower shape there becomes something that looks a lot more intentional. And that is actually my very favorite way of fixing mistakes. And I'm sharing that with you because by embracing those flaws, I discover that I have depths and abilities that I didn't know I had. If I was painting to my comfort zone, then I'm panicking, I'm blotting, I'm trying to go back to the place where I feel secure. But by taking something that was out of my control, I get to explore new ways of coping and dealing with that issue. And I'm just going to show you something else too. These colors have a lot of push to them. The turquoise is really pushing into my flower here. If I want to just slow it down a little bit, I can actually go in with my magenta and push back just a little bit. I can also go in with, hang on, my yellow, I think. We'll give it a try. We'll add some of that Hansa yellow and do something daring. And this is why I wanted to show you that painting from this afternoon as well, that purple and orange splash of color, adding more water here, because pushing my limits, doing more than I thought I was capable of, exaggerating or increasing contrast, gives me this amazing, unexpected, this is where the watercolor magic happens. Magic doesn't happen if you're always trying to be in control. So we have to give ourselves some freedom to play and explore and experiment. And so I think really when it comes to mistakes, don't let them paralyze you. Something I realized recently, and we're right around the time where I'm going to start taking your questions here. Something I realized recently was I was holding back in an area of my painting journey that I didn't even know was a kind of a stumbling block for me. And I'm always with painting thinking, what am I afraid of? And then going to do that thing. So I like to try to ask myself, do a little personal inventory every now and then and say, Angela, what are you afraid of? What things are holding you back right now? What are you trying to avoid? And then I really analyze why that would be. And I realized that I was afraid of overworking my paintings. I was pulling back and stopping short. And I couldn't decide sometimes when I would look at one of my finished paintings, whether I had decided it was finished because it was really good and it was done, or if I had decided it was finished because I was a little afraid if I kept going, I was going to wreck it. And If you've ever experienced that, let me know. Say so in the chat. So when I realized overworking was a fear for me, I'm going to see if I can show you. I had a painting that I had been working on that wasn't going the way I wanted. And it was a really big painting. It was huge. And it's over here in the corner. I'm going to see if I can. There, that one in the corner there, beside my big stack of crappy paintings, is the big dark mass of color. And I love that painting now, but I had ruined it. It was actually originally like phthalo turquoise and lots of whites and lots of kind of raw sienna, kind of a mustardy color. And it's not those colors anymore. And I decided that instead of being afraid of overworking, I was going to intentionally overwork that painting. I was going to throw paint at it and lift paint off and throw more paint at it until I really had kind of gotten over that whole fear that overworking is the worst thing you can do. Overworking is not the worst thing you do. I think giving into fear is the worst, because when you overwork a painting, you're actually teaching yourself what works and what doesn't. You can't know what overworking is if you've never done it before. So I hope that encourages you just a little bit. I'm going to be looking at your questions here. Again, I want to just encourage you to go and sign up for the Watercolor Mastery information sessions. If you go to the Watercolor Mastery page, there's a banner at angelafair.com, or there's a link in the description below the video. You can sign up for the Mastery waitlist, and you will be the first to hear about what Mastery is all about, Watercolor Mastery, how this course could help you, and whether or not you're actually ready for it. Again, I don't want you to sign up for it if you're not prepared to do the work, and if you're not emotionally ready to start progressing into that mastery mindset. Daniela says, my paper arches is terribly buckling every try I did yesterday. What am I doing wrong? Daniela, I think that you're probably using too much water, would be my guess. You don't want to have pools of water on your paper. I moisten my paper quite well, but then I tilt it so excess water runs off. You want to just have a nice shine to it. Another thing you can do, if your paper does seem like it's buckling a ton, wet both sides, and then you'll have more evenness from one side to the other. Les asks, how can you see your own style? Les, that's a really good question. I think my style, your style, they're always evolving. That's why I often just say paint till you're happy. Look for those things that make you really excited and chase those. My very first time really recognizing my fear of, well, I don't know how to phrase that. There was a time I remember painting a first layer wash, and it was really just a very basic first layer, but the color was flowing beautifully. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, I wish I could call this finish just the way it is. It makes me so happy, but no one would understand it. And so instead of listening to my heart that said this painting is good and it's done and just walk away, I kept painting and I ruined that painting. And so from there I learned that I need to trust those instincts. So I really work to be focused on, to think about my mindset and how I'm feeling about my paintings. We are going to talk tomorrow about mindset, about body language, and about things that you can do to encourage a creative mindset. When I come into the studio, I need to be in the right frame of mind to paint freely from my heart. However, I'm not going to wait in the house until I feel that urge to create come on me. I'm going to come to the studio and I'm going to create conditions for success. And that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Susan asks, do you keep your board slanted when you paint? Yes and no. A lot of the time I am tilting my board. I like having a roll of masking tape nearby to tilt it with, or I just hold it in my hand. Most of the time I'm working with a slight tilt. That helps the paint to just flow just a little bit better. And it's, you don't want it full vertical. It's hard to use like an oil painter's easel when you're painting in watercolor, because if it's tilted too much, everything just runs straight down and you have water drops. Diana asks, when painting with a juicy brush, I wind up with a drop of water when I lift my brush, which often blooms. How do I correct this? Try using just a little less water on your brush, Diana. I like to say a juicy brush should be loaded. It should be swollen with moisture, but not actually dripping. Have I tried the Daniel Smith watercolor sticks? Diane asks. And what do you find is the best way to use them? I've used them like once. I'm not a great person to ask. I like the idea of using them actually as a portable travel kit, maybe cutting them into chunks and using them just straight up like paint, where you would wet them with your brush and pick up color that way. Because I'm not comfortable with drawing tools, if that makes sense. I'm a painter, so I like using a brush, and so I usually try to adapt my tools that I have to painting with a brush. Barbara asks, what is liquid watercolor, or is it ink? You can get both liquid watercolor and ink. They're going to react differently. I don't have a lot of experience with liquid watercolor. Cornelia asks, Angela, what made that change for you from being the realist and then being in the flow and becoming the real you as an artist? Like I said, that time of failing, that painting that I did where I recognized my yearning to paint a certain way, and then I overrode that with fear. That was really an impetus for me for change, but it took several years before I actually acted on that. And part of that was because I was raising children. My babies were little, and so I was busy. But also seeing other artists who were doing the things I was too afraid to do. Fearless artists. Jean Haynes is a mentor for me. I looked at her paintings and I thought, she has such a level of trust in her viewers. She paints half of a thing. She doesn't need to paint the whole object. She trusts that people will understand and connect with her paintings when she leaves them loose and free. So seeing her do that really inspired me to be more fearless. And like I said, people connect more with my work now than they did when I was a technically good painter that didn't put a lot of heart into my art. Diane asks, where do I find the info on the Fearless Artist email series? Look in the description below the video for a link to that. You can also email me, info@angelafair.com, if you can't find it on my website. I'm happy to sign you up for that. Joanne, the cost of the mastery class is not on the website. Is it free? No, it is not a free course. I invested a lot of heart and soul in that course, and I want you to invest your heart and soul in the course. You might find that it costs a little more than you might ordinarily spend on a watercolor workshop, and that's because I believe so strongly in the results, but you will not get those results if you are not fully invested in it. And so I really want you to know it's right for you before you sign up. So do stick it out, sign up for the free info series, where I will actually share the base principles in the course, which can help you even if you're not financially ready or don't have the time to take the course now. Some of that information will be really helpful to you anyhow. Ever Iris asks, do you continue layering on paintings when they didn't work out? I don't like the look of thick paint anymore, but maybe I should add more. I like the velvety look of rich layers of paint. I don't use it in a pasty way. And that reminds me, I was going to talk to you about tea, milk, and honey tomorrow. So I don't like my watercolors to look pasty like you might see in an acrylic or an oil painting, but thin layers of rich color I think are so beautiful. And I've had fun too with testing out different techniques for lifting off, using stencils to lift paint, and just using failed paintings that haven't worked out, as full permission to just throw out the rule book and do freely paint with wild abandon, and just put as much learning into those paintings as you can. When a painting hasn't turned out, it's a huge opportunity to keep painting and learn more. Because we hold back, we get tense, and we worry, and those emotions come out in our paintings. So when we feel like we have nothing to lose, almost every painting that I do, I start with the mental idea, this is just a sketch, nothing to lose. If I'm thinking this is going to be my next submission to the art gallery, and I'm going to ask $2,000 for this painting, and it's going to win all these awards, that painting is going to fail. And so I really focus on, this is just a sketch, and then paint. Christina asks, how can I loosen up? I always end up getting too tight. Yes, that is an issue. I can tell you one thing. I read it. Another artist said, you will never start tight and get looser. It just does not happen. As soon as you start to tighten up, it's really hard to get it back again. That's a car that doesn't go in reverse. What I try to do is really focus on my body language. I stand when I paint because I want to have free range of movement. And I do warm-ups to help me have a relaxed mindset, to feel the creativity flow and the playful feelings that make my paintings really fun. So I want to get into that fearless zone, and I will paint for as long as it takes to feel free and fearless and excited about painting. And then I will go and work on that serious painting that I wanted to do. And a lot of it is the stern pep talk. So if I start a painting, usually the first time I paint a new subject, Christina, maybe this is your issue. The first time I paint a new subject, I'm going to be fairly tight and realistic to my reference photo. Usually that painting is not one I want to show to the world as being representative of who I am. It might be a good representative of what the reference photo looks like, but if I want to say, what do I really want to say about this painting, it might take me 5, 10, 12 tries to get to the place where I really feel like this is what I wanted to say. This is a combination of what I experienced when I saw that scene and, what I love about the scene itself. And so I'm willing to paint and repaint for as long as it takes to get to that place. And so give yourself permission to be a little boring and work an idea to death until you really feel that thing let go and have that freedom to paint it in your way. Judith asks about quill brushes. She says, I have difficulty using them and wondering if there's a specific way to use them. Quill brushes are a really fat, round brush, and they hold a lot of water, and they also will deliver a lot of water to your paper. So I find that they can be hard to use because you end up with a really juicy wash and a lot of liquid, which gives you an idea of when you should use them. When you're wanting to deliver a lot of moisture to your paper, make some big round marks. The quill brush is a good place to go. I don't use them super often. Usually in the early stages of a painting where I'm working in larger shapes. And as a general rule, I try to work large to small. Fill in the biggest shapes and then slowly zero in on the details. We are just running out of time. If you have a last question or two, you can throw those up in the chat. Thank you, Nina, so much for moderating for us and getting all these questions organized so that I can answer them. It's so helpful. We are really just scratching the surface in this 3-hour, 3-day session. I have so much more I'd like to say, and my voice can't handle more. Anyhow, I'm completely parched at this point. But I do have online classes at learn.angelafair.com. If you're not ready for watercolor mastery, I do demonstrate watercolor techniques and how to use them as an artist in making those good artistic decisions, becoming better at problem solving and planning your paintings. And that's all at learn.angelafair.com. The majority of the classes on there are designed for the developing watercolor, someone who knows basic techniques and is ready to start using them in real life painting situations. That just makes me laugh to use that phrase. And I know that when you build your skills by logging those brush miles, you will become more confident and a better problem solver in watercolor. It just naturally happens if you put the time in, and I'm confident in that. But if you struggle with staying encouraged, if you want someone beside you coaching and guiding, that's what I'm here for. Again, I'm happy to answer your questions. You have my website now, and there's an email form there you can fill out if you have some burning questions I didn't answer today. And I will be back tomorrow. So if I missed any questions, we'll cover those in our last session where we talk about having fun getting better at watercolor. That's the best part. Why would we spend all this time trying to get better if it wasn't fun to begin with? So we're going to do that tomorrow. I hope you'll join us. Thank you for watching. Let me find my button to shut the thing down. Again, have a great day. Do some painting, log some brush miles today. Whether your painting turns out or not, you have put in just another step in your journey as an artist. It is not a failure if paint is getting on paper. You are a painter. So thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.